The little girl had already fallen asleep on the couch when the stranger whispered something that made her father stop breathing for a moment. She wasn't asking for another blanket. She wasn't asking for food. Instead, the elegant woman, whose expensive car had been buried in a Colorado blizzard only hours earlier, quietly said that she could not leave the next morning without taking his daughter with her. Every instinct inside Caleb Harper screamed to protect the only family he had left, but what he discovered before sunrise would change all three of their lives forever. If you believe kindness, hope, compassion, forgiveness, and second chances can still change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories inspired by the best of humanity. Caleb Harper had never imagined his life would become so small. Once an ambitious carpenter in the quiet mountain town of Breckenridge, Colorado, he had dreamed of building beautiful homes across the United States. Then illness stole his wife Rachel, far too young, leaving him to raise their 8-year-old daughter Grace. Since then, every sunrise had become a race against unpaid bills, school lunches, and construction jobs that barely covered the mortgage on the tiny cabin Rachel had loved. Grace never complained. She wore hand-me-down sweaters, smiled through every difficult season, and somehow made their modest home feel warmer than any mansion. That December evening, the snowstorm arrived without mercy. The roads disappeared beneath heavy snow, power lines bent beneath the weight of ice, and the wind roared through the pine trees like an angry ocean. Caleb had just finished sealing the windows when headlights flickered outside before disappearing completely. Pulling on his coat, he stepped into the freezing darkness and found a luxury SUV trapped in a deep snowbank. Inside sat a woman wrapped in an expensive wool coat, shivering despite the vehicle's heater having failed. Her name was Victoria Collins. She explained that she had been driving from Denver to inspect one of her company's mountain properties when the storm stranded her miles from the nearest hotel. Her phone battery had died, and rescue crews had suspended operations until daylight. Without hesitation, Caleb carried her suitcase through the snow and welcomed her into the cabin. He gave her the only bedroom while he and Grace prepared blankets beside the fireplace. Victoria protested, embarrassed that strangers with so little were giving away everything they had. Caleb simply smiled, believing that kindness was never measured by the size of someone's bank account. Throughout the evening, Victoria watched father and daughter together. She noticed how Caleb quietly skipped part of his dinner so Grace could have seconds without realizing it. She watched him repair Grace's worn backpack with fishing line instead of buying a new one. She saw bedtime prayers filled not with requests for wealth, but with gratitude for another day together. Every small moment stirred memories she had buried beneath decades of board meetings and business deals. Victoria had built one of America's fastest-growing educational foundations after inheriting her late father's real estate empire. Despite unimaginable success, she had never married or had children. Years earlier, a devastating medical diagnosis had ended that possibility forever. Watching Caleb and Grace filled an empty place in her heart she thought had disappeared forever. Later that night, unable to sleep, Victoria wandered into the living room where family photographs covered one wall. One picture made her knees weaken. Rachel stood beside Caleb on their wedding day, smiling with unmistakable joy. Victoria recognized her instantly. Rachel had once been the college roommate who had helped her survive the darkest chapter of her youth. They had lost touch after graduation, but Rachel had written one final letter years earlier, asking Victoria to promise that if life ever became difficult for her future family, she would help however she could. The letter had been misplaced during one of Victoria's many moves, only recently rediscovered inside an old storage box. She had been searching for Rachel for months, unaware her friend had passed away. When dawn finally arrived, Victoria approached Caleb with tears she could no longer hide. She explained everything, including Rachel's forgotten letter and the promise she had carried in her heart ever since finding it again. Then she gently admitted that she refused to leave without Grace, not because she wanted to take her away, but because she wanted to become part of the little girl's future. She wanted to fund Grace's education, create a college trust in Rachel's honor, and ensure Caleb never had to choose between paying bills and giving his daughter opportunities. Caleb stood speechless. Pride urged him to refuse, but Rachel's memory reminded him that accepting kindness was sometimes as courageous as offering it. After many emotional conversations over the following weeks, Victoria became more than a generous benefactor. She became family. She attended Grace's school concerts, celebrated birthdays, and quietly helped Caleb expand his carpentry business by introducing him to restoration projects owned by her company. Instead of charity, she gave him opportunity. Instead of replacing a father, she honored one. Years passed, and the tiny mountain cabin remained filled with laughter. Grace grew into a confident young woman who earned a scholarship to study architecture, inspired by her father's craftsmanship and Victoria's belief in education. Together, the three of them established a non-profit organization that restored homes for struggling single parents across rural America, proving that one act of compassion during a snowstorm could echo through countless lives. Before this story comes to an end, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment telling us about a time when a stranger's kindness changed your life, or when you were able to become that blessing for someone else. Your story might inspire another viewer who desperately needs hope today. As Grace stood between Caleb and Victoria years later at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for their newest community housing project, she realized family is not always created by blood alone. Sometimes it is built by promises kept, sacrifices shared, and hearts willing to open their doors to someone in need. The storm that once seemed like a disaster had become the beginning of a miracle none of them could have imagined. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that compassion still exists in our world, please support the channel by liking this video, sharing it with friends and family, subscribing for more uplifting stories, and letting us know in the comments what message stayed with you the most. Because every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to become someone else's new beginning.